James had always been sure of who he was. His routines were predictable, his life uneventful. But that changed the night he came home and found his front door slightly open. He hesitated, his mind racing through a dozen possibilities. Had he forgotten to lock it? Had someone broken in? His hands clenched into fists as he stepped inside. The house was silent. Too silent. The kind of quiet that made the air feel heavy, unnatural. Nothing seemed out of place. His keys were still on the counter, his shoes by the door, the lights just as he had left them. But something felt off. As he moved toward the living room, a chill ran down his spine. A shadow flickered across the hallway mirror. His reflection stood there, but something was wrong. It took him a second to realize what. His reflection wasn't copying his movements. James froze. His breath hitched as his reflection slowly tilted its head, watching him with an expression that wasn't his own face, but different, sharper, unfamiliar. A small, twisted smile spread across its lips. Then, without warning, the lights flickered and the power cut out. The room plunged into darkness. James stumbled back, heart pounding, reaching blindly for his phone. The screen's glow lit up the space in front of him. The mirror was empty. His reflection was gone. His fingers trembled as he turned, the weight of unseen eyes pressing down on him. And then, footsteps, slow, deliberate, coming from the hallway. James wasn't alone in his house, and whoever or whatever was with him looked exactly like him. James's breath came in short, uneven gasps as he listened. The footsteps were slow, steady, moving toward him from the hallway. His mind struggled to make sense of what he had just seen. His reflection, moving on its own. That wasn't possible. It had to be a trick of the light, stress, exhaustion. But deep down, he knew better. He took a careful step back, his phone's glow barely illuminating the room. The air felt thick, heavy, like something unseen was pressing down on him. The footsteps stopped just outside the living room doorway. James's body tensed. He could feel something standing there, just beyond the reach of the light. His thumb hovered over his phone screen, ready to turn on the flashlight, but something held him back. A deep, unsettling instinct told him he didn't want to see whatever was waiting in the shadows. His heart pounded against his ribs. He swallowed hard. "Who's there?" His own voice sounded weak, uncertain. Silence. Then a whisper, faint, almost playful. "James." His name, spoken in a voice identical to his own. James's blood ran cold. Every nerve in his body screamed at him to run, to get out of the house, but his legs wouldn't move. He forced himself to take a slow, shaky breath. This isn't funny." His voice wavered. A soft chuckle drifted through the air. It was familiar. Too familiar. James's grip on his phone tightened as he finally swiped to turn on the flashlight. The beam cut through the darkness, landing directly in the hallway. It was empty. The footsteps, the whisper, the presence, gone. But the moment he turned back toward the mirror, his stomach dropped. His reflection was there again, staring at him. But this time it wasn't just smiling. It was grinning. Wide. Too wide. And then, slowly, deliberately, it lifted a hand. James watched in horror as his reflection reached forward, not toward the glass, but past it, as if the mirror was no longer a barrier, as if whatever was inside it was trying to get out. James stumbled back, his breath catching in his throat, as his reflection's hand pushed further, distorting the glass like rippling water. This wasn't just a trick of the light, this was real. He fumbled for anything, a weapon, his phone, an escape plan. But his body refused to move. Then the reflection spoke again, its voice still eerily identical to his own. "You don't belong here, James." His pulse pounded in his ears. If he didn't belong here, then who did? The air around him grew colder, the room tightening like a trap. And in the mirror, the other James stepped forward. James's mind raced as he watched in horror. The other James took another step, its body pressing against the glass like it was nothing more than a thin veil. The surface rippled again, and then a hand emerged, pale, identical to his, but wrong. The fingers were slightly too long, the skin stretched too tight over the knuckles. James's stomach lurched as the hand curled into a fist, pressing against the air like it was testing the boundaries of the room. His instincts screamed at him to run, to get as far away from this impossible nightmare as he could. But his legs refused to move. The reflection's grin widened. "I've waited so long," it whispered. Its voice was his own, but laced with something else, something hungry. James gritted his teeth, finally finding his voice. "What do you want?" His voice barely came out, hoarse and uneven. The thing tilted its head. "To come home." A sharp crack echoed through the room. The mirror splintered, jagged fractures spreading outward from where the reflection had pushed against it. The surface bent inward, like something was forcing its way through. James staggered back, gripping the nearest chair, his breath ragged. Then, without warning, the room shook. The walls seemed to tremble, the lights flickering wildly. The air itself felt charged, humming with energy. The mirror pulsed, its glow intensifying. James clenched his fists, panic clawing at his chest. The cracks in the glass deepened. The reflection took another step forward. And then, with a deafening shatter, the mirror exploded outward. James threw his arms up to shield himself, and when he lowered them, the other James was standing in the room. James's heart pounded as tiny shards of glass scattered across the floor, glittering like ice under the flickering light. The other James stood motionless, his head slightly tilted, his grin frozen in place. For a moment, neither of them moved. James felt his body tense, his mind screaming at him to run, but something about the figure in front of him kept him rooted in place. It wasn't just that it looked like him, it was the way it stood, the way its eyes locked onto his, as if it knew something he didn't. Then the thing took a step forward. James flinched, but it didn't attack. It simply lifted a hand and pressed it against its own chest, as if testing its own form. Then, in a voice that sent chills down James's spine, it whispered, "You're in my way." James backed up, knocking into the table behind him. His phone clattered to the floor, the light from the screen casting long, distorted shadows on the walls. "You're not real," he choked out. The other James blinked, then took another step. "I am now." Before James could react, the lights went out completely. Darkness swallowed the room, thick and suffocating. He fumbled for his phone, but in the pitch-black void, he could hear movement, quick, sharp footsteps circling him. He spun around, his breathing uneven. Then a whisper, right at his ear. "You were never supposed to be here." James swung blindly, his fist connecting with nothing but air. The whisper came again, but this time it wasn't from one direction. It was everywhere. Layers of his own voice, overlapping, surrounding him. Then, as suddenly as the darkness had fallen, the lights flickered back on. James gasped, his eyes darting around. The other James was gone. The broken mirror was intact again, as if nothing had ever happened. But something was wrong. The air felt different. He felt different. And then he noticed something that made his blood run cold. His reflection in the mirror? It wasn't moving. James lifted a trembling hand, but the figure in the glass only stared back at him, motionless, empty-eyed. That's when he realized he was the one trapped. James's breath came in short, panicked bursts as he pressed his hands against the glass. It was solid, unbreakable. He pounded against it, his reflection staring back at him with vacant, lifeless eyes. This wasn't right. This wasn't real. On the other side of the mirror, his double, no, the real James, stood in his living room, rolling his shoulders, flexing his fingers, adjusting to his new body. It looked up, locking eyes with him through the glass, and smiled. A real, human smile. James shook his head violently. "No, this isn't happening," his voice echoed, muffled within the mirror's cold, silent prison. He slammed his fists against the surface, desperate, but his reflection remained frozen in place. The other James stepped forward and placed a hand against the glass. "You were never supposed to exist," he murmured, his voice calm, almost pitying. "I was trapped here for so long. You were just a placeholder." James's mind reeled. Placeholder? Number? He had memories, a life. He was real. He had always been real. But had he? Doubt clawed at him, twisting in his gut like a sickness. Outside the mirror, the other James picked up James's phone from the floor and checked the time, nodding to himself. "Don't worry," he said, slipping it into his pocket. "No one will ever know." James banged his fists again, screaming now. "I am real. You can't do this." But the other James only gave him one last look before turning away. James's vision blurred with frustration, rage, and terror. He couldn't stay here. He wouldn't. He pressed both hands flat against the glass and willed himself forward, pushing with everything he had. The mirror rippled beneath his palms. He could feel the surface weakening. The other James turned sharply, his smile fading as he realized what was happening. His eyes darkened. "No," he whispered. "You can't." James pushed harder. The glass shuddered. The air hummed with an unnatural force, as if reality itself was splitting apart. And then the world flipped. James stumbled back, gasping for breath. He was in his living room again. The mirror was in front of him, intact. But his reflection? It was screaming, pounding at the glass, trapped. James stepped forward and looked at the reflection that was no longer his own. He smiled, a real human smile. And then, without another word, he turned off the lights. Darkness filled the room as James stood in silence, listening to the faint, muffled pounding from the other side of the mirror. The sound was weaker now, more desperate. He knew exactly how that felt. He had been there just moments ago. But now everything was different. He was the one on the outside. He was the one who existed. He took a slow, deep breath, letting the reality settle in. The room around him felt more real than it ever had before. The air was heavier, the floor solid beneath his feet. It was as if the world had accepted him fully, as if it had erased any doubt of who he was. His reflection, his former self, kept pounding, its movements frantic. Its mouth formed words, but no sound escaped. James watched for a moment, tilting his head the way the other had done before. He could almost hear the terrified voice in his head. "Please, I'm real. I belong here." James had said those same words. He had believed them. But now, as he stared at the thing trapped behind the glass, he wasn't so sure anymore. Maybe this was always meant to happen. Maybe this was the way things had to be. The knocking slowed. The reflection's face twisted with silent rage, then fear, then something worse. Acceptance. It pressed its forehead to the glass, breathing heavily. Then, just like that, it stopped moving. The figure in the mirror became still, lifeless, just a reflection once again. James exhaled, reaching for his phone. The time was the same as before, as if nothing had changed, and in a way, nothing had. He was still James. He still had his life, his memories, his world. The only difference was that now there was no doubt. He turned away from the mirror, running a hand through his hair, grounding himself in this new reality. Everything would be fine. He would go on, live his life as he always had. As he walked out of the room, he flicked the light switch off without looking back. And in the darkness behind him, the mirror remained,